Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is, as I said before, Andrew Brown. I'm the Director of Business Development at Yash Technologies, and I'd like to take a moment to welcome you to today's webinar titled How to Maximize Your SharePoint and SAP Investment to Deliver ESSMSS Functionality. Before we begin today, I just have a few small housekeeping matters. I'd like to thank ASUG for co-hosting today's event and our partners at Analog Devices for their enthusiasm in speaking to the delivered solution and its value as a business enabler. Joining me on today's webinar as a presenter is Yash's VP of E-Business Practice, Sriram Jayaraman. Sriram will be supported by two representatives from Analog Devices, Brian Harton and Peter Cudahy. Welcome, gentlemen. Today's session speaks to those companies looking to leverage their investments in both SAP's HCM and Microsoft SharePoint to achieve transformational business value. Before we begin and I turn it over to Sriram, I wanted to launch a few poll questions, and I'm hoping that people can participate in those. Those will help us understand the bias within the attendee group here. And there's a function within your control panels to respond to the poll questions. Additionally, as the presentation moves along and you have questions, please feel free to enter those questions into your control panel. We have some time budgeted at the end of the presentation to answer questions. And lastly, this presentation will be recorded and available on our website in a day or two. So appreciate it. I'm going to go and launch one of the poll questions now. So the first poll question is, are you already using or planning to use SAP HCM and SAP ESSMSS for your HR needs? If folks could toggle what's most appropriate for your business, I'd appreciate that. I'm going to keep that open for another few seconds. And I'm going to close that down and just share those results. So by and large, the audience here seems to be using HCM and SAP ESSMSS. Thank you, everyone, for responding to that. I'm going to launch another poll. And this one's related to SharePoint. What are your plans about using SharePoint as your enterprise portal and collaboration platform? And if folks could take a moment to select what's most appropriate for them, I'll keep this open for a few more seconds. Thank you, everyone, for your responses. I'm going to close that poll now and share those results. So the majority of you are already using SharePoint, as well as planning on implementing or currently implementing, and some are looking into it as well too. So this is going to help Sriram and his team speak to more clearly to the audience. Sriram, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Again, folks, if you have questions, use your control panel to answer those questions. We'll do our best to get through those questions at the end of the presentation. Sriram?
Thanks, Andrew, for the introduction, and thanks for the poll. And as we understand, a lion's share of the people here are also SharePoint users and as well as SAP users. So we are going to tailor it more to your benefits in terms of what you can achieve with your ESSMSS functions along with the integration of it. So when we start, we would first start with some of the priorities which we are seeing with the HR technology landscape. Now, if you notice in most of the businesses today, HR is one of the organizations which is in consistent pressure to do more with less. So you're expected to reduce your costs, you're expected to increase productivity, and you're expected to give superior service levels. Now, this somewhat sounds like magic, but still this is what is expected out of the business in many occasions. And not only that, with lesser and lesser spend being made, there is also increasing pressure in order to attract, engage, and retain employees also in this business climate. Because changes are going to impact your business productivity, and retaining talent and attracting the best of talents, even in this business climate, is a big challenge which HR wants to identify and organize. Given this being the biggest business challenges for a HR organization, how does or where does technology spend on HR go down today in the industry is that primarily it's on innovation of business process and make it much more easier, where employees are empowered to interact with HR much better, and regular checks and balances and business processes are available in place. And the second one is that of spending the investments in terms of talent management processes, in terms of grooming talent, relearning talent, and improving talent within the organization is becoming a huge challenge. And that's where the spend is going in also in HR. Now, interestingly, what happens is that while you have a structured platform with SAP, which is going to introduce these business processes and talent management processes, what also becomes a need for most of the enterprises is that these to be complemented with the new generation Web 2.0 tools, such that these applications are much more collaborative, much more interactive, and simplifies the usage of these applications in order to find out subject matter experts or search information or access information at the right place and at the right time. So why SharePoint becomes an attractive candidate, as I've seen it in this webinar as well, a lion's share of people in some form or the other are already invested in SharePoint, and they're also invested in SAP as well. Now, using SharePoint as a silo generates functions for content management, business intelligence, search, and also collaboration and workflow and business process management to some extent, and that's because of the Microsoft's platform. And because these collaboration features are available, and also the feature in order to do business processes are available, the maximum value in your SharePoint investment is leveraged when you start integrating your business processes along with the ERP. But one of the perceptions which is there in the industry is that it's an expensive process to do because of the challenges in different versions being available, because of the challenges associated with integrating different backend data, disaster recovery, and also SharePoint, because it's easy to use, there is always this risk of the user, the environment going out of control in the amount of usage which is going to address. Now, Yash as a business model, what we focus on this particular space is that how do you mitigate these challenges in a cost-reduced and less complex fashion? So what we do is we achieve the goal of doing more and less with combining best of both these worlds with our methodologies on user experience, architecture, as well as business process coming together in the solution. Now let's look at a sneak peek of how do we architect these solutions. We leverage the core SAP HCM investment which you do as a platform in your organization as primarily our core repository for business processes and checks and balances and master. And if you have already invested on ESS or MSS, and if you have some workflows built in, or if you have some amount of your business process built in for your workflows, what we do is that we leverage that in order to deliver single sign-on, a single sign-on oriented, collaborated employee self-service and manager self-service. So what happens is you get a unified user interface across multiple applications, not only SAP. For example, you might be running your HCM platform in SAP and your payroll provider might be ADP, or your recruitment provider might be somebody like Tally or anybody. For all of them, what we do is we bring them together in a unified user interface for delivering a lion's share of the employee self-service and manager self-service function here. The advantage which it drives is that it's one unified gateway for your end users in your organization to access multiple applications internally within your organization. And because of the fact that in SharePoint 2010, there are enhanced business intelligence capabilities like performance point services, we also leverage it for your enterprise reporting and as well as analytics. And with the investment SharePoint has in terms of video streaming and content management, we also use it for strategic HCM like e-learning, performance management, compensation management, and career growth planning kind of features. Some of the features which we leverage very heavily for this particular integration need for our customers is using something called as the business connectivity services in SharePoint. If you are users of SharePoint 2007, you would have already heard about the business data catalog. Now, what happens with business connectivity services is that it's available across the SharePoint Foundation, the SharePoint Standard Edition, and as well as the Enterprise Edition. And the feature with business connectivity services today is that you can leverage it along with SAP services or web services in order to also not only read data, but also update, delete, and insert data into external data source. And that data can be front-ended using SharePoint. And along with SharePoint 2010, as you are aware, you also have Office applications on the web. These information can be made available in tools like Word, Excel, or Outlook, which your users pretty much use day in and day out. So your task notifications or task alerts and reminders in your workflow can be made available for you in Outlook as well as on your SharePoint portal, where you combine the best of both the worlds and deliver the solution for you. These are when we talk about the different scenarios we enable using SharePoint and SAP integration, the primary candidates which we see for employee self-service are personal information management, managing leaves and vacations, entry of time cards, registering for benefits, irrespective of whichever is your benefits platform, and inquiring for benefits or also 401k posting, and also pension services and 401k registrations. We also facilitate the capability for the end users to register for new jobs and also communicate with the HR. So what happens is that with the employee self-service, we reduce the manual labor which is involved for the HR organization in responding to these needs. The manager self-service primarily focuses on update management and workflows for time card approvals, expense approvals, budget analysis, salary and bonus actions on compensation, new hire onboarding, and offboarding is also something we focus. The strategic HCM, we focus on e-learning, enrollment for trainings, succession planning, career planning, managing competencies, and also planning incentives for sales and acquisition of new talent. The BI features, we enable it for dashboards and scorecards and also doing some predictive analysis on workforce patterns which happens within the organization. So it pretty much opens up your whole world of your business process related to the SAP function and enables much more of self-service for employees and managers to reduce their HR challenges in terms of costs and manual labor. That's the goal which we achieve with these different kind of scenarios of integration across. So the key features which is there is that, as we discussed, it's single sign-on based one-point gateway, and SharePoint offers you a good personalization infrastructure. So we target right information for the right people within the organization. So managers get a different view of what they are going to use vis-a-vis that of what employees are going to see. And that's also customized by region. For example, if in the global world in which we live today, if you are going through a scenario where you are working with people from China or Philippines, their policies of employment are going to be different than of the policies of employment which you have in the US or Europe. So you can tailor the content according to that policies, that region, and also audience it for that particular basis. And there is also collaboration support. So we have also question boards and knowledge FAQs where employees can come back and give you questions, and then the HR organization and the subject matter and the HR organization can come back and respond. One effective feature which is being used across in this is the people search in My Sites, where users can search for employees in their organization and their information and subject matter. So at this point of time, what we are going to do is we are going to turn around to our customers whom we have implemented this solution in the real world. So I'm going to introduce Brian Hatton, who will take over from me in discussing how this solution has been implemented in their organization and what are the business benefits realized. And that will be followed up with a demo from Peter Karicki on the real world solution which has been implemented for them. Over to you, Brian.
Well, thanks very much, Sriram, and thanks to Yash for providing us an opportunity to share the analog story and give a little bit of background, not only on our company, but on the project and the challenges we faced. Just a very quick commercial about Analog. We're a technology company. We've been in business for over 40 years, which is a little bit unusual for a technology company. But we're in the semiconductor industry. So we produce both signal processing devices from an analog perspective as well as a digital perspective. We have about 8,400 employees worldwide in 25 countries or so, and we cover multiple industries with thousands of customers. Sriram had mentioned in his overview some of the challenges from both a business perspective, a technology perspective, an integration perspective, and we certainly confronted some of those prior to launching on this initiative. For years, our HR department confronted multiple service challenges, including a lack of clarity around support worldwide. It's very difficult for employees or managers or even outside vendors to understand who to go to for what type of questions. It was often different by topic, by employee, by region, and it created a great deal of frustration not only among the user community but around the HR organization as a whole. In addition to this, there was a limited tool set for both employees and managers, and it was also inconsistent in terms of access and availability, depending upon who you are, where you sat, what country you were in. It was very, very different around the world, which led to an inconsistent user experience for both employees and managers. As a result of this, HR had very little time to focus on more complex business and employee issues, and they're consumed by pure administration or pure inquiries, and little time to really focus on some of those value-added activities which they were so skilled and able to provide. This led the HR organization to really embark on an HR transformation effort, and they took a hard look at how they delivered services worldwide, and they embarked on a project to really create a new service delivery model that provided answers to many of these questions in terms of usability, access, performance, and service. We as a company had deployed SAP HCM and ESS functionality only for certain regions and with very limited functionality. Additionally, the overall user adoption was low and deployments were complex. SAP has long been a strategic platform that Analog has been on. We've been a customer since the mid-90s. We continue to utilize SAP, and they will continue to be a long-term strategic partner for us across a wide variety of applications. But what we need to do is do a better job of leveraging the SAP environment as well as some of our other tool sets that we had deployed internally. Most of our global offices still relied on manual processes, which led to a loss of valuable time and resources for the company. Processes were supported through forms, email, voicemail, phone tag. Administration was decentralized, and it really provided inconsistent services for our employees and managers worldwide. So if you were in the Philippines, or if you were in Limerick Island, or in the U.S., the level of service could be much different depending upon your need. As a result of this, we were challenged to simplify some of our HR processes and workflows and to provide a seamless back-end integration with SAP and some of the other systems. We needed to do a better job of creating a consistent, standardized approach, as well as develop repeatable processes. But we had to do this while we also developed a positive user experience for both our employees, our managers, and our constituents. Many times, employees and managers would recognize or have difficulty obtaining organizational views around the globe from both a functional and an organizational perspective. We really didn't have any type of who's who functionality that allowed employees and managers to search by person, by organization, by geography. It oftentimes frustrated employees and inhibited some of the collaboration that we were really looking to achieve. As a result of this, the project team, we understood a lot of the challenges we faced from a technology perspective and from an operational perspective, but not until we really got out and met our employees and our managers worldwide did we really understand their frustrations in a lot greater detail. We conducted multiple focus group sessions across organizations, across functions, different roles, across geographies, and we learned very quickly that this wasn't necessarily just an HR issue, but really an organizational issue, or really a service issue, where employees and managers were frustrated by the online tool set, frustrated by the inability to find answers to easy questions, and it really became broader than just an HR context. It became, how do we provide a tool set to employees and managers that makes them more effective in their role? As part of this, we embarked upon this initiative and we implemented a solution using the SharePoint platform to create a portal or a gateway that provided enriched tool set along with access to content, knowledge, tools, and integration with both internal and external applications with single sign-on functionality to targeted applications. We integrated SharePoint with the SAP HCM and ESS functionality to leverage really our SAP investments. And when we say leverage the investment, it really wasn't purely from a transactional standpoint, but also from a data perspective. Managers and employees often didn't have the information that was relevant to them in an easily accessible manner on their desktop. We started on a long-term strategy to really extend that functionality over time. This was not a turn on the lights and we're done type of project. This is really to create a platform, to create a strategy, to create a service delivery model that we intended to enhance over time and evolve as we went further. So one example of what we did to improve the employee experience from a personal information perspective is that we now enabled an easy way for employees to view or edit their personal information online using SharePoint with enriched information from the SAP application. It was a simple user interface with contextual help, and it provided them an easy access point to get to the information which had troubled them in the past. an interesting side note to this is we had been providing similar type of functionality in the past, and employees were unaware of it. We had a great deal of activity on the site, a lot of employees and managers going out to the site and updating their information to provide more relevant data for both their teams as well as their personal information, which wasn't there before. Not only can they view and update their own personal information, but we hope to be able to soon provide similar updates to things like their biographies, job titles, location, again, to provide value-added service and a more complete view of not only their background as an employee, but to provide additional information that may allow collaboration across the different business lines. As part of this, we enabled workflow to make sure that those transactions were approved in the appropriate manner. We enabled this workflow to create a flexible approach to data management, and it could vary by region or function. For example, there may be certain countries where if you're updating your dependent information, you need to have proof of that update as part of that. As part of this workflow enablement, we allow our application to target those countries that may require that workflow and make that a stop along the transaction path. Whereas other countries that don't require that type of background, the workflow path is much more streamlined. And at the bottom of that slide, you'll note a very high-level summary of what that information update could look like. Another example in that Sriram also alluded to during his overview was we want to provide enhanced people search capabilities to our employees and managers. We want to provide not just a name search, because we did have an online directory, but a more robust search that allowed users to filter or search by specific parameters such as business title, department, location. If you want to find out who worked in our Ireland office, you could search by that. If you want to find out a design engineer that might work in Germany, you could search by that. And what this did is provide a really valuable tool for both our employees and managers around the world. As part of this search, users can search by a structured or an unstructured approach, and the results will come back in multiple hierarchical views. This has proven to be a very powerful and popular piece of functionality that we introduced as part of our deployment, where we've had numerous feedback in terms of how this has provided benefits to them not only on their day-to-day job, but from a business perspective to allow them to target and reach out to colleagues around the world. We've also enabled some streamlined manager self-service tasks that has really replaced a burdensome and inconsistent process with a consistent approach. Managers can now make organizational changes right online, supervisor changes, cost center changes, things of that nature. And these tasks are supported by workflows that enables each manager based upon specific requirements of the business unit to process those transactions appropriately. The individual approved tasks are tracked and automated reminders. We do this through a couple of different areas. We have intuitive work lists, which will clearly show a manager where a particular transaction stands in the workflow process, as well as email reminders if, for example, that transaction has been pending for quite some time. The workflow below shows a simplified view of what an organizational update might look like. And one of the benefits of this is, dependent upon the type of transaction, we can build the workflow accordingly. For example, if it's a more sensitive transaction, we might require additional layers of workflow along with it. It could be something like an off-cycle increase. As a result of that, that might have multiple approval paths, 4 or 5 levels up that require VP level approval. Whereas something simple like a cost center change, the manager may be able to process the transaction, and the transaction simply updates the back end of SAP. But it's not necessarily all about transactions. We had mentioned up front the need to provide increased tool in terms of content, in terms of knowledge, in terms of data. One of the areas we focused on was also on the vacation balances. As a result of this deployment, employees now have an easy way to provide or to obtain access to their current balance, what they've taken year to date, what they're expected to take year to date. We've also provided additional information on the manager's desktop, where they can get a quick snapshot view of either their direct reports or as well as their indirect reports, several layers down, that allows them to report not only on what they've taken to date, what vacation time is left for them to be taken. And as we get to close to the end of the calendar year, this has become a very valuable tool for our managers so they can proactively reach out to their teams or to their staff and encourage them to use up their remaining balance prior to the end of the year. Managers can also provide a quick snapshot of what vacation time is upcoming in the next 2 weeks. Simply when the manager logs onto the portal, they'll have a list of their employees and who is scheduled to be out of the office for the next 2 weeks. And what this allows them to do is to plan accordingly and make sure that they have the coverage or to have the information at hand so they have to follow up with them in advance of that vacation time. We've offered a couple different views for the manager to access that information. They have a calendar view to graphically represent that time that their team will be out on vacation or out on a particular leave, as well as an overview of the annual position relative in terms of where they stand with current accrual balances. At this point in time, I went through these slides relatively quickly, and they did include some screenshots to the right of them. But in order to provide you a little bit more detail on those screenshots and the functionality that they provide, I'm going to turn the controls over to Peter Cudahy to walk you through our connections environment from the development side. Yep.
So I'm just going to do a quick demo. Thanks, Brian, for that comprehensive overview. Jump in here and jump into our initial manager screen. Let me just check if everyone can see this. Okay. I need to share this. Okay, I see it's come up now. So what you're looking at here is the view a manager would have when they come into our connections, what we call connections, HR connections or connections HR services. This is what the manager would see initially. Now, you can see this is kind of divided into 3 real parts. On the left-hand side, we have a lot of employee-related links, such as things that relate to the person as an employee. The middle section deals with items that relate to the manager's job as a manager. And on the right-hand side, we have a HR-related type of links. So when we started off this project, we engaged with a screen designer, web screen designer, to actually lay out the the pages, master pages, and we also wireframed everything up. And even before we started that process, we, as Brian mentioned, we conducted a lot of focus groups, and from the focus groups we constructed personas, and from the personas and the input we actually kind of came up with the design. I'm just going to show you. we use a lot of the SharePoint features insofar as all these boxes here are web parts, and we can manager, they can come in, they can actually minimize them or maximize them. I don't know if you can see that very well because there's a little bit of a delay, but they can minimize, they can maximize them, and again we came up with use of flyouts at the top of the screen, so people can have multiple ways to get to the transaction. They can use the flyouts at the top of the screen, or they can click directly from the links here. And again, we didn't stop the actual engagement with employees and managers at the deployment level. We do have very prominently on the screen here a site feedback link. So this links to a SharePoint survey that a user can click on and actually give immediate feedback. We thought that was very important because we just started rolling this out, and this is this is the start of our effort, and we anticipate this will go a long way. There's a lot more to do than what we have right now. And again, this homepage brings together a number of our links to different areas. On the left here, we have a view edit my personal data that Brian showed you. That's linking to a form that allows users to update their SAP master data in the back end. We have things like tuition reimbursement, which is down here, which is actually a static PDF form. So somebody can actually link to there to do that information. And we also have links to some of our external providers, like if somebody wants to view their paycheck, they can link to the ADP site to view their paycheck. Okay, now I'm going to actually jump in and show you a few of the transactions that a manager might use. And the first one I'm going to show you is My Team's Profiles. And this one can be accessed from a number of places. either directly from the link in the middle of the screen here, from the flyouts at the top, or if you want to link directly to one of your direct reports, you can do so from the actual profile web part here on the home page. So this profile web part, it actually just shows the direct report. The manager can click on this, and hopefully this will work. So again, this is linked to the My Teams profile page. Now, all this information is retrieved real time from SAP. So it's actually, pulling the data back from the back end. And again, we're making use of Telerik controls here. So a manager, they can filter this information. If they just want to view every employee by a certain grade, they can do so. Show you that. So basically, they'll pick up all the people in that grade. They can also, as Brian stated, we have multiple levels of reporting. The default is direct reports, but the manager can actually, drill down to view all their indirect reports at different levels as well. We can also, from this initial screen where it just gives some brief information about employees, the manager can click on the name, and then it expands down here to show you a more comprehensive resume of the employee. Basically, it's basically all the information a manager would ever want to know, and probably more, about their employees. So again, this provides a one-click, easy way to get at the information. The next thing I'll just show you, and Brian showed this one as well, was the vacation balances. And again, let me just jump in from here to this one. Okay. And again, it's a similar type layout. Let me just close. Similar type layout in that a manager can see the outstanding vacation balances for their employees, and this is particularly important at Analog, as we try to manage the vacation accruals on an annual basis, and managers use this a lot to monitor that. Okay, and another point here that Brian mentioned is the actual related policies and the FAQs. For each form, we have related policies, FAQs, and how to use the form on the left-hand side. And again, this provides a quick way for people to get at the information they need to do their job. So they can, if they have particular questions, they can look up the FAQ. If they want to see what the company's vacation policy is, they can link directly to that. So again, these are all these web parts are actually maintained by the administrator. So every time we need to make changes to these, we don't need to do a migration or anything. It's done directly on the production system. And then lastly, I'm going to show you the calendar view. Just jump back into that one. Again, this shows you the actual status of the employees and kind of what their timeout looks like. So again, you can select one of the items in red here and hover over it, and it does provide the detail there. And as Brian mentioned, on the home page, we also provide calendar information, and that is just vacation. So it'll tell you for the next 2 weeks, which employees are out on vacation, and this is particularly useful for managers. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show you is the actual, a manager wants to make some changes to one of their employees, and this is the change employees organizational work schedule information. So this actually, a manager would come in here if they want to change things like a cost center, working hours even for one of their employees. First step a manager will do is to select the employee. Then they will actually, put in the effective date. Then they need to put in a reason for the change. Then they will decide, okay, which items they want to change. In this case, I'm just going to change the cost center for this employee. So it shows the existing cost center. They select a new one. And again, all this information is being pulled back from SAP, the valid cost centers for the company, etc. And they also might want to make a work hour change. So right now, this employee is working 20 hours, and we're going to change them here. And just to show you here, we have some sorry, I just jumped out. We have some front-end validation here where, you know, a message comes up if it's more than 40 hours. Change it back to 40. Click on review. And then we get, there's a review screen here where the, you know, the changes are highlighted in blue for a manager to easily see. We've also got a progress bar up at the top that shows you where you are. And then lastly, if the manager is happy with these changes, click on the confirm, and that will initiate the workflow to make these changes. So a couple of other points that Brian mentioned is the audiencing piece, and we make use of the SharePoint user profiles to determine, you know, which items appear on the home page. This is a U.S. employee, but if it was a Canadian employee, you wouldn't, you know, a lot of these links would be different. I think that was all I had on the demo, and I'll hand you back now to Sriram to.
Oh, thanks, Peter. So right now what we are going to do is we are going to summarize the benefits through Brian will be summarizing the benefits which we have been achieving with this particular solution for their end users in analog.
Thanks, Sriram. We've had quite a few benefits already from the implementation of the SharePoint site and its integration with some of our other applications. From a user experience perspective, we've really been able to personalize and simplify their experience and offer a high level of control to our users. So whether they be a service center associate or an HR professional or an employer manager, we're really able to personalize the site and provide them with the information they need. Not just from a roles perspective, but also from a geography perspective. Peter had showed you kind of the home page view, and dependent upon the location, those links may be different dependent upon where you're located. We've provided simplified one-click or single sign-on to a wide range of applications, both internal and external, which allows us to promote a single gateway to multiple applications, and we've activated single sign-on with targeted applications, and we expect to increase our utilization of single sign-on further. Some of the other benefits that we've had is we've enabled seamless HR portal and created a collaboration platform. With HR portal functions, we're enriched with both the SharePoint capabilities, such as personalization, My Sites, and Web 2.0 features. And what it really allowed us to do is develop a strategy to leverage features further and promote further collaboration down the road. So it's created a framework for us that we intend to leverage and expand over time. We've simplified some of the process workflows that I had noted earlier in the presentation, whereby today, or previous to this, transactions were very inconsistent, depending upon who you are, where you were, and who was supporting you. And it allowed us to really develop a consistency of service and a flexible level of service as well. As part of that, it allowed us to also release some of the administration or administrative burden on our HR community. We extend the utilization of HR dashboards further to really provide the power of dashboards that integrates both views and analytics. So from a manager perspective, whether you're a mid-level manager or a senior manager, our intent is to build out this site further to provide some further analytics that integrates data from multiple applications around the company. Some of the productivity benefits with the streamlining of the processes, the standardization, and the consistency, we've actually been able to increase both employee productivity as well as HR productivity, whereas in the past it's often difficult for an employer or manager to process these transactions because they really didn't know which avenues to pursue, and there are multiple tools to do it. It streamlined their experience as well as improved HR's overall experience with administration. But it's become less about reducing expenses, which we have been able to do, and more about really the total user experience to make sure that we provide a platform and a tool set that provides a lot of value-added features to both employees and managers around the world. And lastly, it's really helped facilitate the implementation of a new shared services center and the transition to a new service model. Similar to other companies, we've embarked on this HR transformation effort to not only make the HR organization more effective and efficient, to provide better services for our employees and managers worldwide. It's allowed us to address many of our business challenges that I summarized up front towards the beginning of this presentation.
So with that, we are over with this our side of the presentation, and Andrew, you can throw the floor open for questions.
Thank you, Sriram, and thank you everyone for entering your questions. I've got quite a few to go through, so I'm going to throw these open to the panel. We'll do our best to get through all of them. If there's some follow-up that we have to do to respond to individuals at the past the close time for the presentation, we will endeavor to do that as well too. So first question is, please clarify, does SharePoint, and this was in your portion of the presentation, Sriram, does it sit on top of the SAP portal?
Actually, SharePoint integrates, it doesn't physically sit on top of the SAP portal. The way we have worked is that SharePoint works as a presentation layer where we rehaul the SAP portal layer. And there are scenarios like, for example, even in our implementation, where we don't use the SAP EP at all. We directly integrate with the WAS above layer for our integration. So it's not like SharePoint sits on top of SAP. It's a completely separate installation, which has the flexibility to directly either interact with the EP layer or even interact with the WAS above layer as well.
Okay,
that's the answer to the question now, Andrew. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is, are you using Microsoft Forefront Identity Management or SAP Identity Management for single sign-on?
Actually, we use neither. What we do is, SharePoint 2010 is a claims-based foundation in the platform. There is an identity model and software which is implemented using data power within analog. So what we do is, we leverage ADFS or Active Directory Federation services to integrate with data power. And what we essentially use right now is SAML tokens to do claims-based authentication and in the future authorization across all different layers. So it was dependent upon ADFS is what we use in integration with data power. But to answer your question, if you're a Microsoft shop and if you're using Forefront Identity Management, we might as well we can leverage that and use it across. We just need a SAML compliant claims-based provider to integrate with. That's it.
Thank you. Are you sharing iViews from Enterprise Portal to SharePoint as URL view, or is custom development web parts using web services?
Okay, the one thing which we have done in our implementation is that most of the functions which you saw right now in the demonstration are web parts which are consuming web services from SAP. Having said that, there are certain functions which are still being evaluated and we have not completed the user experience, where we just literally rehaul the iView back into that of the SharePoint environment. And the reason why we do it like that of building new user experience or web paths is based upon the fact that we wanted to deliver the superior user experience which the users are asked for. So we built it based upon the user needs. That kind of flexibility was something which is not available with iViews. But yes, we have for certain functions like timekeeping, where the users are okay with the existing timekeeping iViews, which we have rehauled it as a web part in this application.
Yeah, some of it is a question of time as well. You know, for the initial release, we still utilize some of our SAP iViews, but going forward, we'll move more stuff to
our web part-based model. Yeah.
How do you control standardization for such things as job title, global region, and departments?
I'll take that one, Andrew. We've actually, as part of our HCM implementation, we went around the world and have a single instance of HR globally. So we spent a lot of time up front with the HR organization, the different functions, to make sure that we had consistency in terms of jobs, in terms of employee groups and employee subgroups. There are some slight variations by country, which we have to account for, but for the most part, we've been able to put in place global standards in some of the values that we have in place. Definitely around organizational information, definitely around job information, some variances around employee groups and subgroups, but for the most part, it's been pretty consistent worldwide. And what that's really been able to do is allowed us to kind of leverage that single instance of SAP and build it out further in terms of workflows.
We also have like a corporate compensation department who kind of
Right.
with one central kind of authority on this stuff. So,
yeah. So that's the answer, Andrew.
Thank you. Are you using delivered SAP ESSMSS WebDyn Pro or building your own screens in SharePoint?
In our application context, it has all been building our own screens because the user experience was a huge critical success factor in our environment. Yeah, in terms of a technology model, can we do it? The answer is yes. But what we thought was we wanted a standardized user experience across and a superior user experience and a standardized workflow platform as well. And that was the driver to build it across on SharePoint.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, another reason we want to do that is obviously the user experience was huge, but we also wanted to enable and integrate with other applications as well. So if we built out additional transactions, whether it's through employee self-service or manager self-service, we really want to promote the consistent user feel, user experience across these applications, regardless of what was sitting in the back end. So that was another reason as well.
Yeah, that's correct. For example, like onboarding is currently being done in Talio, which is not being done in SAP. So in the future, if the onboarding workflows needs to be integrated across with SharePoint, we would want the standard framework to be used across. So that was the answer, Andrew?
Okay, so maybe just as a follow-up question, and you may not have to go too far on this, was the challenge then to provide a single user interface to many disparate systems, or was it to sweeten the SAP UI on the front end?
It's a combination of both. I would put it that way, and Brian and Peter can validate that. One is there was a pressing need for better user experience on what SAP was offering from the end users. That was one of them. And the second driver was that of having a standard interface across multiple disparate systems within the enterprise. Yes, it is not only SAP which was the driver, but all the other pieces which were also coming in. But it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I would agree, Sriram. And what we really wanted to do is provide really a single gateway or a single portal into these different applications. One of the things we heard back is that although some of these applications outside of SAP were accessible around the world, a lot of times our users, our employee population, really didn't know how to access them, where to access them. They were different by regions, by organizational units. So we want to provide a single gateway into these applications so that if someone had to search our HR knowledge base, they could go to our main portal platform and link out to our knowledge base. If someone had to process a 401k transaction, they could go to our connections knowledge base and link out to the appropriate third party. Or if someone had an ESS or an MSS transaction that hit the SAP backend, same type of situation. So we spent a lot of time up front, not only on the portal design and in the layout, but with the different user communities, with the different user groups, so that when we had our first iteration of what that look was like, we went back out to those same user groups, back out to the user community and say, hey, did we get this right? Is this what your expectations are? And will this facilitate you and your role going forward?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of cases as well, some of these transactions are things that, a person wouldn't do every day as part of their job, so it has to be pretty intuitive, pretty self-explanatory. So the SharePoint did provide us, with a base to kind of have some transactions there, but also to put web parts in for the FAQs, the how-to, and it's an easy environment to work with from that perspective.
Yeah, that's the answer, Andrew.
Thank you. How does SharePoint interact with SAP HCM? Is it using standard SAP ESS function calls or ALE iDocs? And is it talking through the Active Directory?
Yeah, we are in, okay, there are three parts of the questions here. Let me answer it one by one. One is interacting with SharePoint, interacting with SAP. In our context, we are using the web services or what we call as the WAS ABAP layer to expose services from the ABAP layer of HCM to talk to that particular layer. Now, there might be the question where you are working with a version of SAP like 4.6 or 4.7, which is not services friendly. And yes, iDoc can be one part or one mechanism in order to integrate or work with, and there is an alternative where we can integrate with the RFC or BAPI calls as well. So those are the different options which we can use for the integration. And in our context, because it was a services-friendly version, we integrated with the WAS ABAP layer. The second part of the question was, do we leverage Active Directory? Absolutely yes. Because the thing is, there are HR information which is available from SAP as well as from the Active Directory. And what we do is using that's where the BCS added a lot of value. So using the business connectivity services, we leverage and pull information both from Active Directory and as well as from SAP into our user profile data and harmonized it in order for giving better views for our end users.
And within the web services, we are using standard SAP function modules that collect the data and get it and pass it back.
Yes. That's the answer, Andrew.
Great, thanks. Two-part question here. Is the workflow built in SharePoint, SAP, or is it a YASH generated workflow? And then, Are the GUI shots, are those built in SharePoint, SAP, or Yash?
Okay, now SharePoint, SAP area, I would answer it in two parts again. One is workflow, these are workflows built by Yash on top of SharePoint's workflow engine. So it's not, we didn't use the SAP workflow, we used SharePoint's workflow engine, and these are workflows which built on top of the SharePoint engine. And one of the reasons why we did that was that in the future, the business wanted to have the flexibility to do their own workflows, which becomes much more easier in the SharePoint world. So that's the reason why we did it. So it's a combination of SharePoint and Yash, because the thing is, SharePoint at the end of the day gives the workflow engine. So we built the Yash built the HR workflows on top of it. And in the future, the business will be empowered to do their own workflow with some of the tools which SharePoint offers. The user interface, again, we use the built-in web parts available with SharePoint, like for example, the My Profile Viewer, or there is something called as the Visual Web Part Framework, which is available in SharePoint. So most of these web parts are something which are built on top of the Visual Web Part features by Yash. So SharePoint does not give all these functionalities out of the box. Most of them are Yash efforts which in order to build on top of SharePoint. But the advantage which we had is that it immensely accelerated our time to market in order to implement it because that built-in foundation or building blocks were available for us. That's the answer, Andrew.
Thank you. Sriram, can this be done on SharePoint 2007 as well?
Yes, it's going to take you more time. That's the only issue. A little bit of more time. What happens is that SharePoint 2010 offers you much more flexibility in terms of the single sign-on model and all this kind of stuff, which is not available in SharePoint 2007. So the time delta which needs to be achieved on SharePoint 2007 will be a little bit higher. But pretty much whatever functions you saw, many of them are achievable. But one more thing is that the user experience might not be as effective in SharePoint 2007 as 2010 because SharePoint 2010 follows standard Web 2.0 standards for user experience, and we have implemented it using that. So in SharePoint 2007, there might be compromises which you need to make on that direction.
Not for the workflow engine in 2007.
Yeah. So the one more thing is that the workflow engine in 2007 lacks certain flexibilities which we need in 2010. For example, the 2010 workflow engine, you have the flexibility to directly call out the SAP web service within the workflow. You can't do that in 2007 by default. You have to have a custom action which involves some writing of code and all this kind of stuff. So that's exactly the reason why pretty much everything is doable. The time to market which you take might be a little bit more higher. And if you're a EA customer or if you're a customer who have bought software assurance with SharePoint, we recommend that you try to do this on SharePoint 2010 because it's much more easier and faster to get it done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How do you handle single sign-on?
Okay. The way we implemented the single sign-on model here is using something called as claims-based authentication and authorization. Okay. The infrastructure which we used was the ESB platform, which is already invested in by Analog, which is data part. And on top of it, we use something called as Active Directory for Federation Services as an STS, or what you call as a security token services. So the way the claims-based authentication model works is any application within the enterprise, when it needs to get authenticated and integrated, it first goes across to the STS provider. They issue claims or tokens which gives you the trusted access for this application. And the tokens also have information for your authorization. And then with that, they come back and access SharePoint. And what happens is that the SharePoint SAML tokens might be different than that of the SAML tokens on SAP. So the STS takes care of transforming those tokens also and delivering it across to SAP at this point of time.
Great, thank you. Are you using organization management to get the level of relationships?
Yes, we're using structural authorizations within SAP.
Okay. And then regarding the time off vacation piece, is that piece delivered with SharePoint, or is there a mechanism to request time off, or is it only to display the time off that has already been taken?
Right now, what we have built is that based upon the vacation which are already recorded in SAP, we can have it as views across. Now, there is going to be modules where we can request time off and go through these workflows, which is doable in SharePoint, and it's already in the plan and the radar. But right now, what we have done is that it's just now on the view factor which we have done. But yes, we can also have a form to capture that information. It's already on work in progress right now.
Yeah, I mean, right now employees would use the SAP ESS application to request time off.
Okay. Who created the forms? Was it IT or HR personnel?
The forms designs are controlled by HR personnel, but it was created by IT for the first rollouts and implementations. Now, the reason why we took that particular approach is because we didn't use the form services which is available only with the enterprise edition of SharePoint. This solution is implemented using a standard edition of SharePoint. But so in the future, if the business users themselves want to have the control of designing the forms, if they are in an enterprise edition, it also opens up the opportunity for doing that.
Yeah, and I would just add that as part of the forms development and the design, it was really a close collaboration between the IT organization as well as the business organization. So we had many a session where we sat down and designed these, and then went back to the user communities and came back and edited them. So it was really a collaborative approach.
Yeah, we got a designer in, a screen designer in, and an expert on UI design to help us with that as well, because early on we realized that from the feedback we were getting from managers and employees that it was critical that we get the design right, and it also had the help. I mean, because we came up with pretty good wireframes and good screen designs, it also helped when it came to build the product, that we had one single point of reference that people could go back to, and there was little time wasted in actually talking about colors and stuff, which can happen along a project. But we'd all that done up front.
So I'm mindful of the time. Thank you for the question, for your answers. I've got a couple more questions, and I think we're going to have to wrap it up. We'll do our best on this side. We can capture all these questions, and we'll provide some follow-up directly to those folks that ask those questions. But just time for a few more questions.
Yeah, probably we have another 3 minutes, Andrew. So go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk about what is driving the security model? Is it SAP or SharePoint?
I would say that the security model is driven on a centralized basis across both these platforms. So it's a decoupled enterprise-wide security model which we have implemented. Yes, but from an authorization perspective or access control perspective, we have implemented a unified authorization model both at the SharePoint layer, and we have also implemented the authorization model at SAP layer as well. So the way it works is that there are checks and balances for authorization on SharePoint, and also there are checks and balances of authorization on SAP. The authentication model is a centralized enterprise-wide model based upon claims-based authentication, which both leverages the Active Directory infrastructure, which is again integrated with the SAP model.
Yeah, on the SAP side, we do have some automated processes that run to actually assign roles to employees and managers as they assume new positions. So it's pretty automated. And that works pretty well.
Okay, and then final question: is this portal? What are the globalization aspects for this portal if there's multiple languages across the platform?
Right now, it's only in English in what we have implemented, but from a capability perspective on SharePoint 2010, and that's one area where 2010 can offer more flexibility than 2007. For example, in 2007, the variations was a very simple model, and it didn't support stuff like right-to-left languages and all this kind of stuff, and the complexities involved in Chinese CJKV languages were quite difficult. But in 2010, it's a much wider and flexible model for variations. So there is stuff for point and translation and all this kind of information, which can be leveraged and used across. So globalization, we have not focused on it right now. Yes, but personalized local functions and audiences is definitely focused on. But we have not yet made it multilingual or anything of that kind. But you can leverage the SharePoint infrastructure to get that done.
Yeah, I mean, from an analog perspective, English is the main language of communication. So, initially, we're just focused on rolling everything up in English.
Well, guys, thank you very much for your time. Attendees still on the call, we really appreciate your interest and energy. There's just a tremendous volume of questions. We could probably spend another hour and a half going through them all. As I said before, we will do our best to get back to each one of you on these questions. And in the interim, if you do have any pressing questions, I would encourage you to submit those questions to info@yash.com. But please be assured we have captured those questions, and we will do our best to get back to you on those questions. Again, I'd like to thank ASUG. I'd like to thank Brian and Peter and Sriram, and all attendees again for your time. I hope you found this helpful in understanding how to leverage your SharePoint investment along with your SAP investment too. As I stated before, you will be receiving an email shortly pointing you to where this recorded broadcast will be uploaded to our website. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time, and have a great day.